And welcome to this national edition of the Armstrong-Williams Show. Dr. Aza Allsop is joining us. He's an artist, assistant professor of psychiatry at the Yale School of Medicine. And Dr. LaNail Plummer is the author and CEO of Onyx Therapy Group. Welcome back, doctor. It's good to see you. You know, listen, there was just an announcement, Dr. Allsop, where they're moving to remove anyone 13 years or younger off social media because that is unhealthy for them. And social media does not teach you about morality. Just put a lot of things in your head and it's left to you to navigate. What are your thoughts in terms of even the psychiatry of taking young people off of social media? You know, it's not allowed in places like China and other places.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, we have come to a place where social media and technology is replacing a lot of the natural interactions and ways that we used to learn. And I think, particularly in today's society, when brains are still developing, the overstimulation of some of these digital spaces, we do see being linked to greater feelings of anxiety and depression in youth. And there's not a lot of regulation on what content they get exposed to once they're there. And if the relationship is not there with the adults in their lives or their community, then they're left to try to process these things alone. And we've seen, suicide and really, bad outcomes as a result of adolescents using technology. Again, I don't think this is the fault of the technology itself, but it's the technology within the society.
No. I think they know exactly what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think, and they're not even conditioning for them when they're babies. They're really conditioning when they become adults because it's already there. And it's what they will become after all this.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess, and what I mean by that is that the technology is the technology, right? How we use it or what entrepreneurial or economic things.
Babies are different.
Exactly. And that's why I think there is something to how it's regulated for adolescents to use, because that period of development is such a critical time for how the brain is going to function.
You know, Dr. LaNail, let me ask you, are we seeing a direct link between digital overstimulation and rising anxiety and depression? And as Dr. Allsop mentioned, I mean, even the suicide. And how does constant content consumption affect the attention span over time?
Absolutely. One of the things that we're talking about and normalizing here is the fact also that the brain is created in a developmental fashion. And so there's parts of the brain that develop over time. So when children are exposed to information before their brain is actually developed for that information, it confuses the pathways a little bit. And so essentially what we're saying is that children are exposed to information that their brain can't handle yet. And then that's when we're seeing that that they're experiencing some maladaptions and some misinformation in the experiences that they're having. As we talk about this, also we recognize that one of the main facets that are developed early in life is our sense of our neurotransmitter of dopamine. And dopamine is actually that aspect, that neurotransmitter, that hormone that helps us with our focus. It helps us with our memory. It helps us with our reward system. And in the digital framework that we're talking about in this way, that dopamine we have an increase of dopamine when we get new followers on social media, when we get likes on certain posts or stories that we post or that we share. And so, but still yet the brain isn't quite ready for all of that. And so,
and I don't mean to interrupt you, those things are fleeting.
Yes, well, dopamine is fleeting because it's a hormone, and the feelings that people experience are fleeting too. People often forget that an emotion and a feeling is only 96 seconds, and yet people are making lifelong decisions off of feelings that are only 96 seconds. The hormone itself stays in the body a little bit longer, and when people are bored, and I know we'll talk about that in a little bit, but when people are bored and they don't have a lot of motivation, when they get that dopamine burst, then it makes them think that things are different than they actually are. And so that's when you find people starting to get on social media, especially children getting on social media more frequently because they are bored and they need a dopamine increase so that they have more motivation, and they have more reward in that moment. It's been replaced by other things. You know, when we were younger and in school, maybe we would get a dopamine increase when our teacher told us that we had done something well, or when our friends congratulated us for something, or when we excelled well in a sport or a hobby. But many children aren't in those environments nowadays for different reasons.
You know, Dr. Allsop, what is it? What does desensitization actually mean psychologically, and why do people report feeling both overstimulated and emotionally numb at the same time?
Yeah, and so desensitization really has to do with the fact that the brain gets used to whatever it's exposed to over and over again, right? So the first time that I see something violent, there might be some shock value there. There's a lot of salience given to it. But the third time I see it, the 10th time I see it, the 50th time I see it, right, the brain now is not treating this as something new
Normal.
or novel. It's now become normal.
Normalized, yes.
Right? And so that psychologically, things that oftentimes initially would cause us to have pause, anxiety, cause us to really pay attention in a certain way, over time, the brain starts to say, oh, this is
like
normal.
kids in these communities that see violence all the time. They begin to see
normalized.
It's
Exactly.
normalized.
Exactly. And this idea of both people feeling overstimulated and emotionally numb is, again, we have to realize that social media and many of these technological advances are hijacking the brain's natural reward, right? So in our history, when we had to go hunt or we had to find a partner, right? Our brain is using dopamine to say, okay, that was a good thing, you should do that again. But there's some work involved. There's foraging, there's things I have to do before I get that. Now all I have to do is swipe, right? And so we're getting these surges of dopamine without actually having to put in any real effort or work, and it really hijacks that system. And at the same time, we're not actually making true connections, right? So when we have a real conversation, or when I'm connecting to people in my community, there are things like oxytocin. There's all these other aspects that allow me to actually feel connected and engaging with my emotions. But a lot of what we see now is very superficial interactions that may be rewarding to get a like, but it's not actually fulfilling that social need that we have for intimacy and real vulnerable connection. And it's replacing a lot of the ways in which people used to be able to interact to find that deeper sense of community and connection.
And it makes you less compassionate, it hardens your heart, and you lose the emotional connection. Well said. We'll be back. Don't go away. Dr. Plummer, is it possible to train the brain back toward focus and depth? And what does this mental discipline look like in a digital world?
Absolutely. You know, the brain is an organ like any other organ, and while it may have been affected by different things, it can actually go back to a place of restoration. It may not be at its full restoration as it was at the beginning when the brain was being developed, or any of the organs were being developed, but it could get closer and better. You know, when we think about discipline, we also often think about it as a matter of behaviors, and that allows us to be focused, and we must have consistency that's there as well. So if we are trying to have some discipline around our digital experiences, and it may mean that there's times where we have to stop using certain devices and stop using certain apps, and then being disciplined in that. There's times where using these apps and using these digital aspects may have become part of our routine. They may become a habit, but we can break those habits by using discipline, or using specific measures like turning off the apps or removing them from our phone, or making it difficult for us to access certain technology. And then whenever we remove something from our life, we have to replace it with something else. So if we're going to remove some of our digital exposure, then we probably need to replace it with something like books, or we need to replace it with a conversation to have with somebody, or we need to replace it with something else, because if not, it makes it easier to default and go back to that habit or that maladaptive behavior.
You know, Dr. AZA Allsop, so let me just have this theory with you.
Yep.
I believe that everybody has the capacity to learn everything. I mean, you're at Yale, you're at Howard, you're an artist. Obviously, you chose to learn. It's a choice.
Yeah.
You can choose not to read. You can choose to say that math is difficult. But we're talking about the same brain, the same stimuli. Why is it that these kids, if they can master the internet, if they can master these videos, why can't they master the academics in the classroom? Why do we have these failing school systems? Why?
Yeah, I think that's a very deep question. It's multifactorial, right? And so I think some of it is, what are the values in the family, the community, and the schools that they're attending? If I'm attending a school in which my learning is seen as surprising, or in which the bar, the expectations are not high, then as a child, right, as we just talked about, they're still developing. There's a lot that's not there. They're going to default into the expectations that are placed for them. And I think in a lot of our school systems, there's not an expectation of success. There's not resources to actually encourage that success. And what we do know is that when children are placed in an environment with high expectations, but also the support and the resources to engage, then I think that sets them up for success in the right way. The other thing I think is that there's really, many of these children are coming into a world that is very polarized. They see what's happening in their communities. It's hard for them to really think ahead of, like, me doing this right now in the 5th, 6th, 7th grade is going to set me up for a life, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. We know that children aren't that great at doing sort of that delayed discounting. So I think when we are also in a situation that doesn't, I can't see myself 10 years into the future, because many of the people I know are going to be dead before 18 or 21. It's hard to motivate myself to do something that is not as automatically rewarding, right? So if I have a choice between a video game or social media or playing something on my phone versus reading something that is challenging, and when I first start to engage in it, it's going to be very difficult, right? It's hard to motivate oneself to do that. And so I think those are just some of the reasons. I think it can go even deeper than that. But I do believe in sort of that inherent capacity for children to learn, and we are by definition learners, right? We come into the world knowing nothing, and we learn. That's what our brain does. But it has to be supported in the right community, with the right resources, with the right expectations and beliefs, and we're oftentimes missing multiple of those factors.
Dr. Plummer, what about the moral clarity with these kids, that gives real purpose and meaning to their lives? And how do we use what we have today to even change the gun culture, the violent culture, that when you're mad at something, sometimes you have to find a way to communicate your way out of it, not just resort to violence?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious about how we're leaning and skewing the conversation a little bit, and particularly because of your first question around, what is happening in these schools. And I think that it's more than what's happening in the household. It's also what's happening economically. It's what's happening environmentally. It's what their access is. It's what their politics are, what their exposure is, and what their reinforcers are. And many households and many parents can't control a lot of those factors. They're doing the best that they can for the students, and then still knowing that the digital world is out there, and sometimes they are allowing too much exposure to the digital world. But it's not just on the parents, and it's not just on the teachers. It's also on the country that we're living in, and whatever politics are connected to how we are reinforcing the experiences of those students. When it comes to morality, that is something that is largely based in the household versus some of the other things like the failing schools that are not based in the household. And so morality is really based on the kind of values and rules that we kind of put in place in our homes and within our small communities that we're working within. It is about the role modeling. It is about the exposure to different values and experiences. Morality is built based off of observation, and it's based off of intention as well. And so when we're talking about morality, it's not that the morality is failing as much within these children, it's that the adults that are around them are not showing up in a very moral way. And so what the children are seeing is what they eventually model themselves after. I think it's important for us to not put the pressure just on the child themselves when it comes to morality or their engagement with digital aspects or their engagement in academics, but also recognizing the role of the family, but also the role of our larger communities and our society too.
You know, how do we address something you spoke about earlier, Dr. Allsop, this delayed gratification, this micro mentality? You know, and the other thing is, you know, kids lie because it gives them immediate reward. It robs someone of the truth. They steal, it gives them an immediate reward, but you rob somebody of their good. They don't understand the greater good and the delayed gratification, earning it, respecting it, and having it for a lifetime and then pass it on to generations.
Yeah, and I think it is a process, right? Like, I learned my values from my family. I learned them from my church community.
Growing
I
up in
learned them
Trinidad.
from my friends. Trinidad and here, right here in Prince George's County. And as a child, that's really the expectation, right? Like, we developed and evolved to have these family structures because there's something important about having those very early imprints, right? From the age of 0 to 7, a child is essentially just imprinting everything that is being seen and observed. And so if I'm growing up within family structures that are broken, community structures that are broken, there's not really spaces where I can see those values or certain moral ethics actually being played out, then it is very challenging for a child, and some would say maybe even impossible for a child to really learn those values.
And what you're also saying is that
into.
social media is more than happy to fill the void.
Social media is one of the ways that they are going to learn something.
Right.
And so if those values aren't being taught or modeled in ways that they have very accessible in their social dynamics, social media becomes another space in which they can learn, except that, as we talked about in the beginning, what they're learning is very, very variable. It's not censored, it's not controlled, and oftentimes they're not learning the types of values that would lead them to have sort of that sense of moral fortitude or moral compass or direction, right? And we see that in our society today, many of those structures that once were important for actually teaching these values and modeling them are being, broken down.
This is the Armstrong Williams Show. Dr. Plummer, Dr. Allsop, and I will return. Don't go away.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence, there's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. You know, Dr. Plummer, when you look at the situation in Minnesota, people like to make it about race, and they try to make it about diversity, but it's really about tolerance and the fact that there are cultural differences, and when people come from a different land, it's not always about assimilation. You got to respect the language, you got to respect the rule of law, you got to respect the culture. But sometimes what happens when people come here, they're overpromised by bureaucracy of the things that they're going to do for them. And so many areas of bureaucracy, whether it's a foundation, whether it's political leadership, whether it's businesses, they fail many people with these broken promises. And you begin to see the chaos that you're seeing in Minnesota. And what it does, it makes it seem that we're against each other, but this is the problem of assimilation. Sometimes it can bring about chaos if promises are not kept and promises are not made, because basically people want the same thing.
Yes, Armstrong, but who's making these promises? You know what I mean? Like, people are oftentimes getting these expectations about what's going to be going on in the US based off of things that they're seeing on social media or things that they're seeing on TV. It's not like a governor from one of the states is calling somebody in one of these countries and saying, hey, you should come here and we're going to make sure that this and this happens for you. No, it's also about the media and the way that the media is portraying what's happening in the United States and only showing like the cream of the crop, as opposed to showing some of the disparities and the poverty that is experienced in the United States as well. And while I agree with you that it's not about race per se, I do believe that there is a morality decline, not just in children and what they're experiencing
And adults.
in age, but also in adults.
Yeah.
We need to move past this idea of tolerating other people from different cultures and tolerating people with different languages and actually embracing them and accepting them and being open and having respect. You know, Americans are quick to travel outside of the United States for vacation, but then when some people from those other countries come here, we act as if they are not welcomed. But yet we want to be welcomed when we go to their countries, even if it's for just a short amount of time. You know, it's that dual reality that's just not happening. It's not cool.
You know, you said it so eloquently. We're going to come back with some final thoughts. I'm Armstrong Williams. Don't go away.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
Dr. Allsop, your final thoughts.
Yeah, you know, we are in a situation now where we're facing, I think, three big crises. The mental health crisis, which we've talked about at length on this segment, the loneliness crisis, which is interconnected with that, and then the polarization crisis. And it's really preventing us from being able to coordinate both people power as well as resources to solve the things that I think are threatening us as a species. This is bigger than just politics or nations. This is about us and our planet as a species. I think that as technology continues to increase, artificial intelligence continues to increase, we have to be very intentional and deliberate about preserving the things that make us human. Actually having a conversation, actually connecting, actually forming real communities based on values like love, right, and family, and these things that I think we've taken for granted, but we've seen where it's leading us, right? And so as a psychiatrist, as an artist, I think finding ways that we can build community, rebuild communities in very real ways, reconnect to each other in really in true ways, and rediscover what being human means with each other. I think that is going to be necessary for us to be able to face these three challenges. And if we don't face those three challenges, I don't think we survive as a species.
Right. Dr. Plummer, you have a minute.
Absolutely. So I think that it's important, like we just said, to understand the emphasis of humanity, which is actually us looking for our similarities and our healing as opposed to looking for our differences. I write about that in my new book, The Essential Guide for Counseling Black Women. While it's written for Black women and for therapists, it has a universal take on it, which is that when we heal within, we are able to show up in different ways, and other people are able to see us and accept us in the ways that we truly should be as well. So the key to all of this, the morality differences, the digital issues, the dopamine, is really how we engage with each other and our intentions about engaging and being open and being accepting and having true respect, not just self-centered motivation, but also what it means to be in a community, and emphasize that more in our interactions with each other.
I cannot thank Dr. LaNail Plummer and Dr. AZA, Allsop for such an intellectual, engaging, respectful dialogue. Enjoy the remainder of your weekend. I'm Armstrong Williams.